Come and get started on a new mission, a new direction, a new intention. Welcome to 5.8G Alive at Connections 50 Plus. I am Terri-Ann Joseph Brathwaite.
And I am Jennifer Gibbons Joseph, catering to all your prospects in the third act of life.
Economic well-being, social gratification, personal fulfillment.
Join us on Wednesday at 6 p.m. on Connections 50 Plus Facebook page, YouTube channel,
and on Gael the Caribbean.
Hello everyone, welcome. It is Wednesday, 11th of August, it's 2021. This is 5.8G Alive. Connections 50 Plus is on air. I am Terri-Ann Brathwaite, one of the co-creators of Connections 50 Plus, and as usual with me,
I am Jennifer Gibbons Joseph. We are the co-creator of Connections 50 Plus. Good evening to you all and welcome to our show.
Great. So Facebook, YouTube, Gael. We began this month, well, this Emancipation holiday, we started with a bang with our concert. And last week, Jennifer, we started a discussion that both of us are very serious about, where we began to give our perspectives on emancipation. And today, we're taking that forward. During this month of August, we are really taking a close look at us, the Afro-Trinidadian, the Afro-Caribbean person, because we're in the season of emancipation. And as Black women ourselves, we are saying, let's as a group take some serious time to introspect, to think of a very important word, legacy. So Jennifer, when you think legacy, what do you think about?
When I think legacy, I think of what can we pass on? I'm thinking of legacy. I'm thinking of the ancestors. I'm thinking of our history. You know, all the positives that we can pass on to the next generation to make their lives better. Right, to improve their lifestyle. So it's on different areas of life, not just the financial aspect, because I know legacy to some people, they just think finances.
They will.
Not just the financial aspect. We have so much just the skills and talent, because I believe too, and that is an African belief that, you have certain families, they're just talented. So they may be very good craftsmen, they may be very good actors, etc., etc. And that's passed down. And if you know your skills, you can pass that on, and that helps with entrepreneurship. So you have that as a legacy. But it's not just about money. So legacy for me mean quality of life, mean the next generation living a better life than we did and our ancestors did, basically, and to make our ancestors proud. So basically, that's it.
Yeah. I know we see legacy from all different fora, and I look at legacy as a moving forward, definitely as a moving forward. So it's a reckoning of where you are. And I acknowledge that for many people, there are broken threads to the past, and that makes them feel that there is no legacy. So I often say your legacy is what you create, even if nothing was there before, but it's where you are and what you create and how you take it forward and who you pass it on to. And this, however we look at legacy, every one of us looks at someone that we admire. And we know there's something about them that attracts us, that we wish to emulate, that we wish to learn about. And I think those feelings and those passions reflect that person's legacy, what they've made. And I agree with you. It's not, I like that one's house or he has the money. No, it's beyond that. So today, people, we've had the nice concert and we've had the conversations. We're inviting an old friend. He was on about a couple of weeks ago talking about fathers and daughters. Ian Jeffers is going to join us, and we are beginning a conversation that we want us all to pay attention to and listen, because we're going to be inviting you all to continue this talk as we build and strengthen our legacy.
Legacy. What are we sharing that the next generation could really use?
Mm-hmm.
And what are we leaving behind that they could stand up on?
Yeah.
And have some sense of continuity and purpose, because we lost that. Because, like, you know, oftentimes, and I mean, and this is not a cynical view, I think sometimes we think that we're doing it. Like, I'll give you an example. You know, I belong to this for a while, this organization, National Alliance of Black School Educators, NABC. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's based in Washington, and it's just that Black school educators have these, I don't even know if they still have it, because I've been out of touch with them for a while. But when I was really in it, every 2 years they would have a conference in a different city, you know, talking about how we're educating, on what we're passing on, the same thing we're talking about now, legacy. And I mean, I got a lot of putting out information and a lot of sharing, good sharing from that. But I'm finding that, like, in the USA context, you know, it always goes a certain way, you know, how to make people, and maybe that's because I'm amongst educators, how you make people PhDs. You know, everybody has to have post-secondary education. And yes, if you don't have post-secondary education, well, you look to post-secondary education people to do things, you know, and help you out. And there's never a real strong sense of community. You know, there's no sense of like who, well, basically who we are before we came here. Yeah. You know, and that's who we were, or who we are before we came here, you know, and there's some of that, but that is almost a sort of a by the way, you know, and to me, that's where the issue really is, because that's not by the way, as the core of it. And when we look around and see where we are, how do you apply this core to what we see before us? And, you know, to me, that means you could be anything that you want to be, and you always have something to share. So you don't have people saying, you know, like, well, you know, I'm not like you guys, because we are all our guys, you know, and so we just pass it on. And we're talking about us people, you know, we've
us
lost
meaning African people.
African people, yeah.
African people in the Caribbean, especially, or African people throughout the Western world?
No, African people everywhere.
Yeah. And if I could ask you a question. People could listen, and depending on your level of consciousness and awareness, you could not hear what you are saying.
Yeah.
From the point of view that you're speaking it.
Yeah.
But if I were to ask you, what are the kinds of problems and issues that you're seeing today that we seem to be struggling with, that may be a manifestation of that lack of a structured passing on of legacy, and making people truly aware of who they are before they came?
Well, the first obvious one is that, like, elders don't know how to talk to young people. I don't think, you know, I mean, elders knew how to talk to young people because young people used to gather around, you know, and there was a clear sense of, this is where we are going and this is how we get there. No, don't ever, I think we had it, you know. I don't think we never had it, you know, because I think that was the kind of underground that was being suppressed through the whole, you know, transatlantic thing, you know, the passage, you know. Anytime, that's why it was illegal for people to get together and talk. And that's why we had to do all kinds of things to be able to get to talk to each other about these things, you know. So I think that we had it, but to be successful was made clear to us. To be successful, you have to leave that behind, you know.
When you say we had it, in what period?
Huh?
In what period did we have it? In the 21st or 20th century, or would that have been long, long ago?
I think we had it when we first came, you know, and I think that a lot of it was still around because, you know, I mean, those of us who at the age and stage now where our grandparents were real grandparents, if you know what I mean. I mean, and they used to pass on the sort of strengths through folklore and all this sort of thing.
We have a problem caused by the absence of a practice that if we take our children, us as the 50 plus, 50 to 80 cohort, and our parents may never have experienced. If we are talking about going all the way back there. So if our parents, ourselves, and our children have not experienced that elder talking to young people in a way that passes on legacy, and if that is one of the root issues, then how do we as the middle group reconstruct? Or is there another manifestation of the problem that you see, apart from the elders not knowing how to talk to young people? Is there another, before we begin to look at what do we do?
Okay. I want to say something about it because like what I'm talking about, I mean, I'm talking about the historical development, right? But I'm I'm not talking about living in the past. Not talking about. Okay.
I'm fully aware of that.
I'm saying that what we have done, you know, there's there was a time when we all had to get educated because that was the way forward.
Okay.
But in order to become educated, you know, it's almost as though you had to go underground to pass on that message because you joined a place, and I hear that like it's almost like you spoke a different language, you know. And I'm saying that like we do not pay enough attention to that aspect of legacy. We don't think it, you know, enough, I should say, because people do it in their families, I suppose, you know. But I'm talking about a whole collective, us knowing that this is something that we have to do so that the process that we are going through, the path that we're taking, you know, we're clearing it for others and we're talking to them about it. I'll give you an example, the Boys to Men program, which is firmly, you know, cognizant of what I'm talking about here. When you will bring elders to come and talk to the young men, you know, and we bring these elders to come and talk to the young men, and they would always ask, and this is the most sensitive one, how do I talk to them? You know, and that's a very good question to ask. How do I talk to them? And the advice, the lead that is given is very simple. You know? You're not talking about your great success because you know, and the things that made you a renowned person. We're talking about how you fall down and how you get up, and what helped you to get up. And that's where the stories are. That's where the stories are. And those stories are not like, you know, not like I got out of this thing, the same thing you're talking about. I got out of that, and this is where I am today. But it's the conversation that says, like, this is what I felt, this is why I saw myself feeling that way, and being honest and being truthful about your experiences, and not holding back on saying the things that really shaped you, the pain that shaped you, and the challenges that shaped you, and not holding it as people talk about it, but when they talk about it, they almost talk about the end product and not the process. I'm talking about understanding that talking through the process is that's where the value is. That's where the elders would talk about, because they are bringing that understanding of that process and understanding of where we are going and where we are. It's
using your hindsight to give them foresight. Yes, Jennifer.
No, I want to say, Ian, from what you're saying, what I'm gathering here, because as you say, we're not going back, we're moving forward. It's really, three things stood out. That rites of passage that I don't know if we ever really, and our era, ever really introduced it to the younger generation, okay? So I am seeing here from what you're saying, the term rites of passage covers that the aspect of the legacy you're talking about, the clearing the path. That I am seeing that we have to learn to, we have to relearn in order to pass on. Right? And I'm seeing your information you're going to share would be, how do we now, I like the term for us to start to use that term, because it's really, I've heard it just recently here in this girl had a talk, and she had, I can't remember the guy who was talking again, mentioning about getting the younger and the elders to get together and that sort of rite of passage sort of thing. I think it's a good talk for us as the older ones to understand how beneficial and how that is needed at this time. And you mentioned the process. How do we now, what do we do? What can we learn? What are the key aspects we could learn from that whole process to pass it on? And how do we pass it on? Whether we pass it on by, and saying we, moving away from just your own family, but the broader society, the community. How do we get together as a community to first appreciate and embrace that rite of passage and see how important it is to pass that on to the younger generation for healing? Because we all right now, and you talk about that, we're in a mess. And this I see it as very important to make a difference to what is happening out there.
In some of the things that you do on this connections, for example, bringing people from different skilled areas to say, this is how you life don't end on retirement.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it's a fresh start, and this. So how do you then say that to everybody? When do we all get together and say, that is true? How do we tell everybody? We don't talk about that. And one of the main, a simple example is when in started the Boys to Men program in 2005, 2004, around there, I can't tell you the number of responsible people who said, I wish you luck. Them don't listen to anybody. I mean, like that, you know, young people that they ain't listening, they don't listen. They just want to do what it is they want. And with every statement you're seeing, you know, like you're seeing their partners. And that's not true. It's, I don't know, it is simply not true. Because people who have come in, the elders that we brought in, who came in with apprehension, I mean, I think they left with more with more energy, having and always
They
wanting.
saw hope.
Well, you know, it is. I'm not so sure. It's just hope that they saw. No? They realized that like they have something to really give, and they had an opportunity to say it, and the expectation that they had with these young people don't listen to anybody, the kind of insight and the kinds of things that the young men were talking to them about that they could identify with, and always had to hold them back from saying, you know, like this is how you do it, because we're talking about developing, you know, the cognitive aspect of all these young in boys, the young men that we talk about, you know, so people can sit down and think for themselves. Take the information that you give, understand that it is given in the spirit in which it was given, and make it work for them, because they come back to you, you know. And so I do not know, you know, when we talk about rites of passage now, there and I've been to a couple of meetings with people who are involved in rites of passage, and I am not talking about, you know, the sort of for want of a better term, the ancient rites of passage, you know.
Yeah, you're not looking at the rituals.
No, I want you to walk on fire.
Yeah, so yeah, that's not it.
We're talking about that.
Yeah.
And I'm not denigrating that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying.
No, I'm with you, but that's not what we are.
It is not. We're talking about how do we say to young men and young women, this is the kind of thinking that we've always thought, and this is what brought us to this place. And you bring that gift, and you have a responsibility for passing that on. You know, and while at the same time giving them all of the information that they need to be quote unquote successful, because they want to be successful. I mean,
but before we reach there, Ian, we have to understand ourselves. And this is where it is. We have to recognize a lot of things. You in your early talk, you mentioned about even your groups, and this is what we know about education. So when you're thinking of moving forward, it's a lot about educating to the highest level, and that's where the power is, etc., etc. Right. So that's one sector, and the sector that don't feel that they can reach along those lines tend to switch off and don't appreciate their own talent and feel their talent or worth anything. So I am thinking that, and Terri-Ann chat a bit about that last week, about changing the narrative the narrative of our age group. To understand too, and we're not discounting education and all that, but seeing how you can create a process that everyone feel that they can be, their contribution is important.
Well, I think we have to realize that, like, and we've all seen it with some people, you know, with somebody we know. You get to a position, and then you become the position, and you can no longer speak to certain kinds of people. Only people you could listen who are the level where they could hear you. And that was not an unfair statement, because I'm not saying everybody does that. I'm saying that, like, you know, that is almost like one of the things that was imposed upon us. We're not seeing that as as an imposition. So the educated, I mean, that's how the gaps came about. That's how the gaps came about. And I'm saying that, like, the understanding and the recognition that this is how the gaps came about allows us to talk to each other in a way where, the essence of education is to be the best person you could possibly be. As the essence of education.
Yeah.
And if that means that you become a nuclear physicist or whatever, if you be, I mean, all of the persons who sort of quote unquote guided us said that, all the icons from the 60s and 70s said that.
Yeah,
and
that's what we know.
Yeah, and somewhere along the line, I don't know how it got bottled up inside of us. We didn't know how to bring it out to the next generation, even though it was passed on to us. Because in a lot of ways it was.
But yeah, it was passed on, and I will challenge that, because I think that if you sit, and Jennifer, you've had this experience too, if you sit with a group of elders, ourselves, and we begin to talk amongst ourselves, or even talk with our children, education is not to be the best that I could be, but it is a competitive tool. It is to show that I am better than you. It is to show that I have done better than you. I've achieved more than you. And I've sat through enough discussions with adults who, when they begin to talk about their children, they're little trophies, and the trophies are all about the degrees and the school, and there are no trophies about the child's character. There are no trophies about things that they would have worked on to build for themselves. There are no trophies about how they may have sacrificed to support and help another, which I think are the kinds of conversations the elders would have had earlier, and that would give the youth the rites of passage. And another thing is, nobody wants to talk about their failures. No, it's as though we are also perfect. And that perfection tied up with you or your children's academic achievements allows you to put a story forward, which is where Jennifer is talking about the narrative. I am so perfect. So the rites of passage is not a rite of passage, it's a rite to trample on everybody because I have done so well. And, I wonder sometimes if our generation, our middle generation, we worked so hard, we had so much pressure to achieve, because our parents really were 1 or 2 generations away from the slave yard, that it was sort of embarrassing for us to talk about our failures. It sort of disappointed our parents. You were supposed to present yourself in this very positive and self-achieving way. And a talk about where you failed or where you fell down may have been perceived as, what you talking about that for? Just hush. Show how good you are, what grade you got, how many degrees you have, or how close you are with the boss. And I wonder if for our generation, we the 5.8G, that conditioning to look respectable and be respectable, separate yourself from your history, which may have been of slavery, it would have been of whatever it is, but you had to come out, look, and on what model did you have? A colonial model.
That's right.
And therefore, there is no way that we had any tool to take our children through a rite of passage that will show them how to sacrifice, how to fail and come again and be better. And I think, I wonder if the root of this chasm that we are in may rest somewhere there.
Well, I think a lot of it rests. I think a lot of it rests inside of there, and it's as you're talking there, I'm talking about the elders, because we call them elders, because we want the young men to understand they are elders.
Young men and women.
Well, no, I'm talking. I'm sorry. I'm referring to the Boys to Men program.
Okay.
But like, okay, young men and women to know that they are elders, you know, and that elders been there too.
Yeah.
And that connection is, you know, like, and I've seen it work in some ways, and I'm not going to call names about people who have passed through it, but, you know, people who are high profile, because we look for high profile people to bring them in, you know, but the high profile people have to be able to say, you know, like, I was there too, you know, and even if, you know, like, I make it clear, for example, that, like, you know, I didn't grow up in the ghetto, you know, but to me, I didn't know what a ghetto was, you know, because the persons that raised me and talked to me about that, you know, never tell me about ghetto. And if they tell me don't go there, I used to go there. Because, like, to me, that was the kind of consciousness that we were getting at the time, you know. And somewhere along the way, we forgot how to pass that on. And I'm saying that, like, in the conversations that we have amongst ourselves, and by we, I'm talking about the 50 plus into whatever, into eternity, you know, have to be able to say that, like, you know, how do we pass this legacy on? You know, how do we do that? You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, everything is important because you pass on, you know, I mean, retirement is part of the legacy too, because these people will retire as well. You know, how do we do that? And I don't think that we consciously address that enough. I think when we address it, you know, from a place where, like, you know, what's wrong with these people? You know, and
Judgmental. Yeah. Why they
and,
didn't do as well as we did?
you know, and it's tough to understand. You know, somebody standing up. Like, one time we have a little exercise that we do in the Boys to Men program. We talk about people, who they are, and, you know, what their goals are and how they're going to go about it, getting that. And I tell this story all the time about this young fellow who started up and say, like, you know, that he gonna be he gonna get some nice girls to work for him, and he gonna make a set of money, and he gonna take that money and give it back to the community. But everybody stopped listening to him when he says he gonna get girls to work for him, because it's like, and they're not hearing what he's saying is that, like, this is my environment, because he said that too. You know, like, you know, he sees people making money like that. That's his world. You know, and our legacy is to ensure that, like, that world, you know, like, I suppose it will never disappear, but, like, it is not as pressing upon us and pressing upon our youth who are developing, so that they feel as though they have no options. They don't have options. You know, the focus is on, when I talk about the education, meaning the best person that you could be, that best person who understands that they are operating at a level where they have knowledge and understanding and respect. They literally could go into any arena and be quote unquote successful, but how you measure success is not by how they you know, as you talk about the education thing, and it's I talk to some people, young people now, and I tell you, I don't know what I would have done if I had to do all those lessons. I really don't. You know,
You have to go to school twice.
I mean, and it's like, it's all that there is. I mean, literally, it's all that there is. And when somebody says, I don't want that, and they turn away from that, it's what's wrong with you. You know, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying anything about education. I'm not speaking about education. I'm talking about what is education. You know, and how do you empower people truly to be all the nice little phrases that we use to be the best that they can be? What does that mean? You know, and people have spoken to it, but I'm talking the legacy part of it is how do you pass it on? You know, it's tough because people have been conditioned to not look at things like that. But we know it. We do.
The way I see us passing it on, and all that is shared there, is actually having gatherings with young people, different ages, and allowing them to chat, and we chat freely. Knowing too that I don't want to use the rules, but we have under the guidelines that we chat in without judgment. We have discussion as the elders, that what are the messages, what we're seeing, and the messages, more or less what you're doing already. But as 50 plus group, this is how we at the 50 plus group going to recover that lost legacy and send some powerful messages to those in the gathering. We can't do everybody, but you start and you're being, have them chat, because what you're saying there, I have 2 daughters at different ages, and what I pass on is from what I learned. And every time I hear, like we are in talks like these, I realize that I have been fortunate. And when I chat, I get the information and I'm told, I learn to shut up a lot because I'm told that you have to listen. So I feel for us to pass on, and it's very important information, very key information you're sharing there and need to be shared. You said something here. How do you get it out in our grouping? Because we have been conditioned differently. Some of us is strictly on education and education in children. So we can say after that we are successful because all our children have degrees and working in big company and overseas and all these things that we have been taught, because our era was always about education. Success is education. Success is a degree, a secondary school and things. Success wasn't, and that's why we don't have tradesmen now. Success wasn't about a skilled person and all that. So we are educating us, our grouping, to look at success differently and to appreciate how the younger ones, how they're moving, what they see as success, is the pressure off of them, because a lot of them, and you would know in your field, a lot of them, everybody know bipolar. Every young person, they go into assessment, they say they're bipolar, they're on drugs, they're on this, they're on that. Because they have no one who really understanding them. If they say, and I shared that, I remember my elder daughter, final year at UE, decided she dropping out, not because she couldn't do it, because she couldn't take it. What she doing this for? She was more math students, and they had in humanities doing maths, had maths and a certain maths. And she decided, and they say the other thing was engineering. She didn't want to know engineering, nothing. She wanted to leave. She left, by the way. By the time she told me, she left. And I remembered, what came to me? Not how she was feeling so much, what my friends and them will say. How I will tell them how it will, as you say, how it will look, because this was part of the whole thing. Until my sister said, listen, much people I know, young people, right from big families, who commit suicide and things. She said that not coming in the news and thing. I don't want that for my niece. So listen, if she want to drop out, let her drop out. Forget who say what. Let her do what she wants and she will catch herself. And I learned from that, because she ended up, without my pushing, decided to go straight up to a PhD. But on the other hand, I understand where people, we have been pressured is about education and prestige and all that. So now we're changing the narrative, I think, to do that. And in our discussion here, I think we're sending the message, understanding all these pressures that we as adults under, and passing on to these younger ones from age 40 down. The body I tell you, young, getting nervous breakdown, can't hold on to relationship, all kind of problem. When you check it out, there's a lot to do with us, our generation. So if we learn, and you as a head, and you as a psychologist, family psychologist, something could guide us as the adult to, first of all, to accept, hey, we ain't discounting all the education, but accept certain things that we weren't always right, and learn how we can chat and have discussion, conversation. I will say not even discussion, conversation with the younger ones, the under 50s to whatever little age. I think that would be a great contribution for the legacy. Yeah, it is my thing.
You know, clearly, the conversations, the trap that we get into, and I'm calling it a trap, is that most of the conversations, once you command, I use the word advisedly, young person's attention or young people group attention, then you become directive.
Yes, that is preach.
No, and I'm not, no, I am not in all agreement with that.
I'm not talking about, I'm saying that this.
That happens.
This is what happens. You become directive.
But this is what we're changing.
Yeah. You know, it happens automatically. And I'm saying that the consciousness that we have to bring to it, you know, you talk about being non-judgmental. That's the hardest work. That's the hardest inner work that people have to do. Because like, and I say that because like, I mean, I worked at it for years, and sometimes I catch myself saying like, because it never ends. You know, you.
Yeah, but we have to start somewhere.
It doesn't mean that if someone has certain kinds of standards that there's nothing wrong with a PhD. You know, when I first came back to Trinidad after spending all this time in Toronto, I remember talking to some persons in the company of persons who were PhDs and other kinds of people of distinction. And, you know, I got into a lot of trouble in that conversation because I remember saying that, like, you know, the PhDs that I've met amongst us, there's almost a badge of, it's almost like a badge of honor. So suppose people take task to it when they hear me say this. Almost like a badge of honor to speak about what you know in a way that only certain people could understand. You know, and you know, and
no humility.
And when you get this knowledge and this information, and you've gone to it in a depth that no one else has. And why did you do that? If not to communicate and share with people so that they know, they now know, you know, regardless of what of where they come from and regardless of the understanding that they have at that time. Because, you know, I've been around people who had these PhDs and you wouldn't know it. And when I say you wouldn't know it, it's the information and the knowledge, it's captivating. You know, and how do you, and that is how, like some of the business persons that we brought in to talk, you know, really do, people do listen to that and they quote it, you know, and one person, I'll give you an example, one person that we brought in as an elder, talking to a group of young men in the class, and talking about how you feel, it was common entrance or whatever it is, first time. No, this is a renowned businessman whose name shall not I not call me and say, oh, him. We talk about how he feel when he failed that competitions and how and the kind of things that he was told and what he was saying to himself while he was being told this. And you know what began to happen? There were some guys in that class who were repeating maybe for the third time. Before he could say it, he's telling them they're telling him what he felt. And by they're telling him what he felt, and he's saying, yes, that's what I felt, but anyhow, this is who I am, no, and this is how I got here, this is how I follow, and an amazing thing happened. It was almost like magic. At the end of the thing, when it's all over, you know, young people were running outside because finally thing over. They stayed back and talked to him. you know, respect. You know, so when you say that, you know what happened to me too? And then they start talking about what the challenges that they face. And that conversation is a natural conversation. That's a legacy conversation. You know, I'll give you a conversation that we sometimes get lost in, the conversation about values. You know, there's always a sense that like, oh, you know, young people today want to hear this, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. What young people want to hear and what they don't want to hear. They want you talk to them about values, and you know, I remember the days. You could talk about those values, but you put those values in context. You know, the context meaning that, like, you know, I am not going to apply those values like how you had to when you applied them, or when they were imposed upon you and you were taught, or however you want to look at it, that these are the values by which, you know, this is what makes us human, you know, and this is what makes us respectable, or whatever it makes us. We talk about those. It's important to have a conversation about those same values and the application of those values to this context. I mean, that is legacy.
You know, I wonder, Ian, also, if part of the discussion is that we ourselves in our elderhood need to have our rites of passage to validate self, because not a lot of us, I don't know many people who could really speak honestly and openly in a group context. I mean, one-on-one or with trusted friends, people who know you from a long time, so you can't hide, who can come out and talk about their journey, the whole journey, the real journey, the parts where they had real failure and so on. I wonder sometimes if perhaps we need to have that before we can think of legacy. We have to find our own legacy, the one that's probably hidden below so many layers of fronting and masking and what the world says is good. Peel back those layers and find who we really are to offer that to young people, because one of the things that young people, they have real good BS detector. First, peel away and really introspect, and then share that in your group. Because when you go now to think of, like, if you don't know what you have to pass on, if what you have to pass on is just a little is a shiny gadget, whether it's a medal, a certificate, or some kind of thing like that, but there's no character. What is your character? What is the strength that got you there, as opposed to have arrived? I think a lot of us have to find that in an honest conversation, and then, you know, share it with others, share it more broadly, and then you can go to pass on the legacy. Because this is my personal thing, I am afraid that we will continue in this problem that you've identified here, by really, you're not passing on anything of substance. You're passing on superficial traits which aren't going to carry anybody very far. And it's because you really don't know what your own substance is.
Well, I will go further and say that you're not passing on. You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, people would sit and listen to that, and some people might find little curious pieces about it that they might want to relate to, but like that conversation is the art of conversation is that, like, only key thing to it is that you're non-judgmental. I mean, I don't know. I'm a storyteller as such, you know, but not a conventional storyteller. You know, like, for example, when my son is growing up, about 15, 16, he tells me one of his stories and I tell him one of mine at 15, 16. You know? And it is not like, let me tell you one, it's like, that's part of my life and I'm just talking about my life, you know, and that, when we are not comfortable with doing that, that's where we have a problem. Because if
I think, yeah, and I think that point, this is something that we have to return to again. We have to return to it again.
well,
Dan, I don't know if you have a because I'm looking at time.
yeah,
if you have another closing statement for this version of the conversation.
No, I'm clear. And Terri-Ann will I tend to go to the end of the whole thing because I see it clear. I am very as I said, I totally believe in conversation. I believe this talk really should, well, I would like this talk to be more about how we as the 50 plus, how we plan to help and contribute to those under 50 to recover the legacy, because it passing on. The 40 could pass on to the 30, whatever, but and how we see what is happening, why we see it important, because of all the different things that are happening now, right now. COVID make it, compounded everything. And because of what we are seeing and we sharing that, we feel that we can help by having these conversations.
Ian, I think we have to have probably a part 2 of this legacy discussion. I think we've just started to scratch the surface, and it is clear that, as Jennifer says, conversations have to change, as we discussed even from last week when we gave our reflections on what emancipation means to us in a contemporary context, not historical, not looking back, but moving forward. And the conversation is really one of the sharpest tools in the toolbox that we would have. So we really do want to thank you.
Okay, later on.
Wow, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Ian always comes on board and causes us to raise up the little scabs, and he doesn't give us room to hide. That was a powerful first discussion. So Jennifer, where do we go from here?
Well, as you said, a very in-depth discussion. And this is what we wanted to have. For us to really start to think, how can we create that legacy? Looking back, because I agree, I do think we have done a great job in that with creating a legacy or passing on that legacy. So I would say, how do we go rediscover? We're going forward, but we're going forward with our experience, and we're going forward, and Ian said it, preparing the next generation, creating a path for the next generation. And this is how I'm thinking going forward, for us to create that path. But for me, and being a coach, I always think about having the conversation.
Yeah.
I believe having conversation, yes, we want to create a legacy. And when I say younger generation, anybody under 50, because we are the elders. I keep saying, last week I said we are the elders. So younger is under 50, right? So when I say the young, creating and like, it's to have the discussion, to have conversation. And in the conversation, we include persons under 50, different in the 40s and the 30s and the 20s, etc., to come together and let's chat. Because in chatting, in sharing the stories and experiences, that's how we can create that legacy from those conversations.
Great. So people, we hope you really were not inspired. We hope that today's conversation caused you to stop and really think, because this is an important conversation. If we are to have a good outcome to this emancipation story, we better make sure our legacies are intact. So we will see you next week when we continue this discussion. Bye.
50 Plus Tribe and followers from Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean.
Thank you for joining us on this Connections 50 Plus 5.8G Alive show.
We hope you enjoyed the lively conversation and look forward to seeing you next week.
Don't forget to like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
We really love getting your feedback. Bye for now.